thank you very much for joining us today for this online briefing for a new project that is now open for expressions of interest. The project's measuring success for fire and rescue services. My name's Blythe McLennan. I'm a Node Research Manager at Natural Hazards Research Australia, and I'll be chairing the briefing today, and I'll be joined by Paul Considine, who's the Senior Performance Measurement Lead at Fire Rescue Victoria. The point of this briefing is for us to give you some more information about the project, context, background and process for applying to do this project. And the main point of this briefing is for you to have a chance to ask all the questions you need and clarify any points about this project that you would like to clarify to support you to put applications in to do this project. Just before we get going, I wanted to make two acknowledgements as well. One is, and I know we have at least one person here from DFES in WA. I apologise for the timing of this meeting for Western Australian attendees. We're a national centre and we do try to have events like this on at WA friendly times. It was unavoidable just for this week, so I do appreciate, thanks Shelley, thumbs up. I do appreciate that it is very early for you and you have joined us. And the other point I wanted to make, that I realised that there's quite a few agency people who registered for this briefing as well. This is primarily a briefing for applicants who are interested in applying to do this project. So that's what the questions I'll take from people today will be around what those applicants need to put in their submission. But we realise that there's quite a lot of agency interest in this project, so there will be a stakeholder briefing a bit later on in the new year to get feedback and help people understand what this project is about from a stakeholder perspective as well. So that's something that will be coming up a little bit later on. I would like to acknowledge that we're all meeting from across a range of different Aboriginal lands today and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm joining from Wurundjeri country in Eastern Nam or Melbourne in Victoria. And I recognise that I'm a guest on their lands as sovereignty has not been ceded. Just a little list here of what we'll cover today. After introductions, a little bit of information about Natural Hazards Research Australia and the way we work, just as context around how projects run, background around the project itself and its objectives, information about the outputs we're expecting from this project and how governance and reporting works in NHRA projects, and then have some information about the EOI process. I'll stop at a few different points to check for questions. The chat is open and you are very welcome to put questions and comments in the chat at any time as well. And I'll keep an eye on those and answer them as we go through. So we sort of keep these briefings quite free-flowing, chatty, not too formal. So feel free to put questions up to us at any time. You'll be hearing from myself and Paul today. This project was requested of NHRA by Fire Rescue Victoria. And Paul has had a key part in developing this project with NHRA, so he'll be able to give you a lot of background about what the project is about, the context, and what we're looking for from this project. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We love to know who is here, and sometimes if people are interested in teaming up to put in a submission for a project, it's a way to see who else is here and possibly interested in putting in a submission for this work. Right, just really briefly about Natural Hazards Research Australia. So we are a research centre. We commenced in July 2021. We sort of have picked up and built on the work of the Bushfire Natural Hazards Cooperative Research Centre prior to that. We have funding from the Commonwealth for a 10-year period and contributions from partners or participants as well. So the way that we work is we pool those funds that we get together to support research, and then we have a process where we ask for project concepts from those participant organisations. So there's a way that they tell us what research and what projects we should be adding to our program. And then we do those projects, they're managed through Natural Hazards Research Australia, but with heavy stakeholder involvement. So I will pass over to Paul in a moment to give you background on this project and a bit more description about what we're looking for in this project. If you have the call for EOI document handy, And if there's anything that you want to clarify in it, I'll keep an eye on chat, and now is a good time for you to put up any questions that you'd like to have explained. But otherwise, very happy to welcome Paul here to tell us a bit more about the background behind this project.
Thank you very much, Blythe. Thanks everyone for attending this session, and hopefully I'll be able to give a bit of an overview of the problem statement and what we're hoping for out of this research project. And later on, there will, of course, be an opportunity for you to ask questions in relation to anything that I don't cover. I would also refer you to that call for EOI document that Blythe mentioned, which does unpack some of these issues in a little bit more detail. So if I can start by addressing the question, why is there a problem? And that quote that you see on the slide there, I won't read it out in full, and the eagle-eyed among you might see that the quote refers to operational success, and this project is about more than operational success. So don't be misled by that. However, the quote in itself is, I think, a really useful encapsulation of the broader issue. And that is the lack of consistent benchmarking for success. And what then happens when people ask the question, are you being successful? And they might ask that in an operational context, and that was the background to that AFAC quote. And the paper that the quote comes from was about operational success. But the principle is broader, and that sentence, if agencies are going to be judged, they should understand the likely criteria or be able to influence balanced commentary, has broader application, I would suggest. So it's not that fire and rescue services don't understand performance measurement or don't do performance measurement. They absolutely do. And you can look at any number of annual reports or websites, both in Australia, New Zealand, and further afield, where you'll find such performance reporting taking place. But what there isn't, I would suggest, is extensive evidence-based analysis to underpin the reporting that's happening. Those of you who are familiar with that performance measurement environment will know that in the public service more generally, outcomes-based reporting has been the trend over the last 20 years. It's notable that a lot of fire and rescue service reporting does still tend to be output rather than outcome based. And the historic focus on response times will be very familiar to anyone who's had dealings with performance reporting and performance measurement in the fire and rescue environment. And there is and has been work done on the question of how response times, because they're so popular as a reporting measure, relates to outcomes. And that's something that has developed, it's fair to say, over the past 10 years, with work being done both in Australia and overseas. But there is still perhaps a limitation on the amount of analysis to support either response times as a reporting measure, or to ask the question, should we be going broader? So a few points on this slide, just capturing some of that. When you look at national and international performance reporting by fire and rescue services, it is inconsistent. And I don't mean by that it's random. And I don't mean that there aren't commonalities, because there are, but you will find different approaches. And the approach in the United States is somewhat different from the approach in the United Kingdom, which is somewhat different from the approach in Australia. And there isn't much at all that I'm aware of in the literature, at least the English language literature, on how performance measurement and performance reporting is done by fire and rescue services in non-English speaking countries. So in Europe, in China, and other places. It's possible to trace the pedigree of some of the metrics we use, and I'll mention response times again, back to before the Second World War. And the fire and rescue service is known for being, as it's been said, 150 years of history unimpeded by progress. That's perhaps a little bit unfair, and of course there's been progress in many areas, but it's quite notable that the concept of reporting response times can be dated back to at least 1936, if not earlier. So that's getting on for 90 years of using that metric, and it's legitimate in those circumstances perhaps to ask, given the emphasis that response times get in fire and rescue service reporting, is that still valid? Have we thought about what else we could be reporting instead? And important also to reflect on the fact that 90 years ago, fire services, as they then would have been called, had a much narrower focus in the urban environment. It really was about going to things that were on fire. And it's about so much more now that you might ask the question, have the performance metrics that we use kept pace with that? And coming to the third point on this screen, are the forms of reporting that fire and rescue services themselves are comfortable with, because they've been used for however many years it might be, albeit with development and with evolution. But are those forms of reporting meeting the needs of the consumer in a broad sense, the governments who foot the bill and the public who pay their taxes and receive the services? Are their needs for understanding the performance of services being prioritized, or are fire and rescue services effectively driving the agenda of what they want to report because it's their comfort zone? So I don't, by saying that, mean to prejudge the question. It's perfectly possible that on analysis, it would transpire that absolutely everyone finds current forms of reporting very useful, but I'm not sure that there is any really very good evidence of that. So what are we looking for out of this project? And the first is an understanding of what leading practice looks like. You'll see I'm trying to avoid good practice or best practice, but let's just ask ourselves what leading practice looks like, but why can we describe it that way? Why is it leading in comparison to other things that are happening out there? Yeah, and I'll come to the point later on, but again, just flagging, it's not as though there isn't an understanding among fire and rescue services of what reporting is happening out there, but it could be useful to have a real overview, both nationally and internationally, of what's happening out there. Consideration of whether fire and rescue service performance reporting has kept pace with that trend I referred to towards outcomes-based reporting for the public sector. And if not, whether that's a problem. Happy again to not assume that outcomes-based reporting has to be used for everything, but let's at least ask that question as to whether that quite popular and quite global trend is reflected in the way that fire and rescue services are reporting their performance. An understanding of what government needs from fire and rescue service performance reporting and whether they are getting it. So reporting shouldn't be an end in itself, and it shouldn't exist in a vacuum, and it should be there to support policy discussions, future strategic planning for service provision, and the like. does current reporting support that? And it would be really interesting, without, of course, because it's not my role to do so, suggesting how these successful bidders for this work will go about it. But it would be really interesting if there were some conversations as part of this project with government, whether that's with senior officials or whether that's with political people in governments, as to where they are getting their understanding from of what should be reported and whether it is sufficient to support their understanding and development of policy in the area. And the final point I'd like to make before handing back to Blythe is to say that this really needs, notwithstanding the first point on this slide, this really needs to be more than just a comparative analysis. So you may or may not, before jumping on this webinar, have done a little bit of Googling around what's out there. And if you have, it won't have taken you very long, I wouldn't think, to get to some academic papers that have been written by people who have effectively asked themselves the question, what is performance reporting in the fire and rescue service? And they've gone out and done some comparative analysis. And they've come back with conclusions such as fire and rescue services often report response times as a metric of success. Yeah, we know that. Thank you. Fire and rescue services often report on numbers of fatalities per million population. Again, yeah, we know that. That's good. This needs to be a deeper dive into what's going on, I would suggest, and needs to contextualize fire and rescue service performance reporting within that broader public sector environment and provide a roadmap for developing and improving reporting. That's key, I think, for me as an end user. We already do reporting. We don't need to be told we should report. What we need to be told is how we can do it better and how it can be as useful as possible for the people who are ultimately paying the bill for the fire and rescue services and the services we provide. So thanks, Blythe. That, I hope, was a brief overview of the background too and what we're hoping to get out of the project.
Thanks, Paul. I realised I haven't got a slide that's actually got the project aim clearly showed on it. So I'll just, and in kind of wrapping up and bringing Paul's information there back to the point of the project, just so the aim of this project is to identify evidence-based measures that will support fire and rescue services to create their own performance frameworks that are based on objective criteria and that can support continuous improvement of policy and regulatory settings and short and long-term business planning. So we're looking for meaningful measures that effectively demonstrate the value and benefit of the services delivered to community, and also that could in future potentially enable national comparisons between organisations based on consistent criteria, although we're not looking at doing a national comparison as part of this project. That's a potential outcome or use of the kinds of metrics that this project will be developing. In a moment, I'll go through to the activities that we've listed in the call for EOI document that we'd like to see happen in this project. But before I do that, I just wanted to pause for a moment and see if anybody had any questions of Paul around kind of the problem statement and the context around this project that you'd like to ask.
It's Claire Noon here from Nous Group. I've got a question in relation to that general content and context for the extent to which you, and Paul, you might want to answer this, are looking for something that is based on a sort of academic literature or something that is really about something practical and implementable. And I think they're two different ideas. So I'm just trying to get the sense from you where you sit on that spectrum, if you like, and where this project aims to sit on that spectrum.
Yes, I certainly understand that they're different concepts. I think they're related in this way, that you have performance measurement and performance reporting going on at the moment. But there isn't a great deal, if I can put it this way, of academic rigor or academic foundation to it. And I rhetorically posed the question, are we reporting stuff because that's what we've always reported or what we've been reporting for a very long time? I certainly don't see this as just an academic exercise. And while I don't in any sense claim academic credentials in this space, those academic papers I have read, to me, haven't been very satisfying. They've been slightly superficial. And I referred earlier to that example of a paper that just says, this is what people report.
Mm.
Great. Now, that's not what this is about. It's why. And what should we be reporting? And ultimately, yes, to answer your question, Claire, it's got to be something potentially actionable. And Blythe's already made the point, and I make it again. This certainly isn't, this is, the output of this project will be a framework everyone will use, because people have got, of course, different requirements and different contexts in which they do their reporting, and that's entirely fair. But it's being able to say, hey, when I'm coming to review my reporting framework the next time it's up for review, it'd be great to have a deeper understanding, not just of why I'm reporting stuff, but what are the needs of the people I'm reporting it to? Who's actually asked them? Or are they just having to take the reporting I give them because they're not in a good position to say to me, hey, you should actually be reporting something else or reporting it in a different way. So I hope that goes some way to answering the question.
Yep, thanks, Paul.
Great, that was great, Paul. Deb.
Hi, Blythe. Hi, Paul. Thank you. Paul, it's a question about fire and rescue. And I'm just wondering about the span of hazard type, response, activity type that you're interested in as a priority. So we're talking about fire, but I know that the span of activity is broadening for the organisations.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Deb. And I'm glad you've noticed that. So I suppose the first point is when we say fire and rescue services, we're referring to those services that are sometimes called urban. I'm not sure if that's a very good descriptor anymore, but certainly services that work in the built environment. So what this isn't, it's not about success in landscape fire management.
Okay.
To take an example, it's about the activities of the, and again, when we look at that example I gave of response times as being a measure, I mean, that's always been less of a consideration, I'd suggest, for agencies that manage fire in the landscape as opposed to managing it in the built environment. But the point that you mention is a really important one, that what these services are doing with their quite substantial budgets is much more than just going to stuff that's emitting flames and smoke.
That's right.
You've got technical rescue, you've got hazardous materials, you've got road crash, you've got medical response in a number of areas. And for me, the big question is, hey, Service X, your budget, in some states, it's upwards of $1 billion a year. It's a lot of money. What are we getting? And how are we measuring how well you're delivering? So yes, to answer your question, I think it's absolutely about more than just going to fires.
Great.
Thanks, Paul. You might want to keep your mic on. There's another question from Liza that I think will be for you as well.
Hi, Blythe and Paul. This might actually be an NHRA question. It's a very interesting project, and NHRA have actually, I guess, commissioned a number of research projects around evaluation and monitoring for impact recently over the past couple of years. And I'd be really interested rather than reinvent any wheels around, you know, risk prevention programs and things like that, how can we build on some of the work that's already in train? Because I can see if, you know, as Paula said, it's not just about fire. So how do we, I guess, build on work that's already happening?
Absolutely. We love projects building on work that's already been done and not necessarily starting again from scratch. And the centre would be really happy to facilitate that and to look at pulling in research that's already been done that can inform the work done in this project. Yep. So we'd be very happy to support and facilitate the bringing in of that for sure. I think that's a really important point. So I'll flip on to the next slide. We're just running through the activities that we have listed in that call for EOI document, but feel free to put questions about anything that Paula said as well. Continue to put things in chat at any time. So this is what is listed in the call for EOI document, and I wanted to give you a chance to ask any questions about what these look like or mean or what the scope of work is in these things. So we have first, as often is in a research project, a review part, which is looking at how success is or can be determined for fire and rescue services. And I find that one really interesting because it's looking at different ways that success is understood through things like government policy and reporting, post-event inquiries, legislation, research, strategic documents of agencies themselves, public media, public sentiment. So that's actually a really important piece that could look at different ways. There's been some research on that already that could be drawn through. And that would be relevant, I'd suggest, not necessarily just to fire and rescue services. That review would be of relevance and interest to other fire and emergency services, such as SES, I would think it could be a bit broader. The next one is a synthesis of current practice in performance measurement and reporting and identifying what I will now call not good practice. Well, it's not best, leading practice, case studies. And as Paul said, that's not just looking within the EM sector and with fire and rescue services, it's contextualizing that within the wider public sector performance reporting. We're looking at for the project to also develop an intellectual foundation, principles and guidance to inform those performance measurements frameworks. So that's really encapsulating what Paul was talking about. Why do we do what we do? And what's the foundation and the basis for understanding? So it's not just a technical look at performance measurements, it's also an intellectual conceptual look at what are we measuring, what is success, why are we doing it this way? And as Paul said, who is using it and why is it for them? We're also looking for the project to consider sort of a model performance measurement framework and how that might connect with national initiatives. Paul, I might throw to you to expand on that one because I think you'll speak to that one a little bit better than me, and that might need a little bit of, that might be one point where people would appreciate a little bit more context around it.
As I said earlier, it would be too ambitious to say what this project is going to do is provide the framework that people are going to use in future. It's got to be something that will support the development of individual frameworks that suit their context and needs. But, and there is a but, that question of connection with national initiatives and policy, I think is a really interesting one. And if we've learned anything over the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's that much as emergency management and emergency response is a state responsibility under the Constitution, nobody is big enough to do it all by themselves. So given that, if we have greater consistency in the way that we are measuring our performance, doesn't that support and conduce to that partnership approach to dealing with the larger incidents? Certainly, I'd suggest that that's something that NEMA would take an interest in with their national lens on how we deal with compounding major events such as a 2019 to 20, which of course, although that mostly played out in the landscape fire environment, there's no reason why you can't apply the same sorts of principles to other events that could potentially take place in different environmental contexts. So asking ourselves that question of, well, how does our performance reporting, firstly, how is it consistent so we can benchmark? But secondly, how does it support policy development, not just at the local or the regional, the state scale, but even at the national scale? And are we able to do more to support the ongoing work that's happening to build national capacity and capability in this space?
The last two activities we've got listed there are about performance measures. So it's looking at identifying a range of potential evidence-based performance indicators and measures. And that is, so in line with that, looking at how success is determined. These were not intended to be prescriptive, but if you were defining success in a certain way, what are the right performance measures and indicators that you would use to demonstrate performance against those success measures or those goals, and looking for the evidence base behind them to be included. We're looking for a range because different organizations will have their own strategic priorities and each agency is different and doing their performance measurement their own way. So we're looking for a range of measures and indicators that can be used by agencies, not necessarily a set of saying this is what you should be using. So it's not meant to be prescriptive, meant to be as a resource, as Paul said, when agencies are reviewing performance measurement frameworks and performance planning. Does that cover that point? Okay, Paul?
Yes, thanks, Blythe. It does.
Excellent, good. Yeah, and within that also just understanding any challenges or conditions around where those indicators and measures can be used and when they may be, where they maybe shouldn't be as well. We're also looking for there. Getting down to the sort of nitty gritty of what we're looking for in this project. This is a list of some of the core outputs. I won't go through them. They're in the call for EOI document. If you have any questions on them, please pop your hand up or put a question in chat. But I did want to make the point that, and I'll show you on the next slide, there is a final report from this project. We are not expecting that each of these outputs would produce a separate report. These are steps towards the production of a final report that would include all these elements in it. But we do like projects to roll out in sort of a progressive way, and for the internal documentation about these to be produced and discussed with, I'll show you, a project management committee in progress as parts that will be put into that final report by the end of the project, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to let you know we're not looking for a report on each of these as an output in a separate sense. So the main substantial output from this project is that final report that encapsulates all those pieces that are developed through the project. We expect there'll be quite a few stakeholder presentations and briefings. There will be a reference group of supporting stakeholders that the project team can engage with to get advice and to use as a sounding board for the project. We would like at least one conference presentation. I think the AFAC conference would be highly interested in a presentation of this project at a future conference. We are looking for academic publications, noting, as Claire asked, that this is more than an academic project, but that intellectual foundation for this work, and that review work in particular, would be well suited to an academic publication. So we are looking, but we're not expecting the full extent of this project to be encapsulated in academic publication, but there are parts of it that are suitable for publication that way. We're also looking for a nice, clear guidance note targeted to fire and rescue services about this and the resources and the measures and things that are developed, a clear articulation of what those agencies can do with what comes out of this project. Additional outputs, these are more the sort of progress reporting type outputs. I will note though, the first one, so for those who aren't familiar with the NHRA process, and this will have relevance when I go to talk about putting in an expression of interest as well. We have a two-part process where the expressions of interest that we ask for are shorter than you would see in if you were looking to put in a full research proposal. And we do that on purpose so that and I'll show you our evaluation criteria. We ask for a shorter expression of interest in the first instance, that is assessed, and then we offer a preferred provider an opportunity then to co-develop a project plan with stakeholders. So we do that so that there is an opportunity to develop that plan together. It's really great for setting expectation and for identifying where research can be impactful and the pathways towards it. So the first deliverable from this project would be that co-developed project plan, and we have a plain language statement connected with that. It just helps us promote and share when people ask questions about the project. It's something simple that we can share around with people. And then the others, quarterly progress report. The evaluation report is just a short reflective piece at the end with the stakeholders and the team involved in delivering the project, reflecting back on it and what it did. Things you would like NHRA to know about how these sorts of projects should run in future things. So it's just a short reflective report. And as noted just there at the bottom, if you have ideas about innovative outputs that your team can deliver in this area, we're really pleased to be hearing about those as well. The anticipated outcomes that are in that call for EOI document are listed here. I think they reiterate what Paul has already provided about the why of this project and the potential. Perhaps one thing about outcomes that I will throw to Paul to comment on, because it has come up in various ways throughout the speaking and development around this project, is around interaction with the Productivity Commission report on government services and this project. So I know that's sort of a little question in the background of some people's mind. So Paul, did you want to comment on that aspect from this project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Blythe. And it is very much something that people who have got familiarity with and an interest in national performance reporting are surely going to have thought about already. So, well, okay, there's a report on government services, isn't there? And there's an emergency management section in that, isn't there? So is this a retread? And I think I'd say it's building on that. The reporting in ROGS, again, hasn't moved very much in the 10 or 12 years that I've been familiar with it. And there's probably an issue that the people contributing to that publication have got, that look, they're working with what they've got. They don't have a lot of independent time and capacity to go off and look at the intellectual underpinnings. And much as I'm not just assuming, I know that it is discussed in those emergency management working group meetings as to how that reporting might be enhanced. It seems to me that a project like this would really provide some assistance to that by looking at some of the things we've talked about this morning and providing some of those underpinnings. So in a nutshell, I would expect, I can't speak for the Productivity Commission, of course, but I would expect that they would be a very, very interested stakeholder in all of this. And I'm sure that they would welcome early discussions as to how this project might support the continuous improvement of that ROGS reporting.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, and through the project, we're happy to, so FRB and the Centre are happy to facilitate engaging with the Emergency Management Working Group for those reports, to have a conversation partway through the project about where this might go and how interested they might be in what comes out of this project. Right, I'm getting sort of down into the process stuff now, but I wanted to reiterate this. So on our EOI submissions, we have a section that asks about research collaboration, and it's listed very clearly in the call for EOI documents. And I wanted to make it very clear that we take this very seriously. So the way NHRA projects are governed through a project management committee that has participation from the service providers, so the team doing the project, key stakeholders and the centre. That group, it really is a collaborative governance model. So this isn't like through, say, a grant process, or academics propose a project and then they go and do it and they lead it. This is very much a collaborative approach where you will be expected to engage with stakeholders and collaborate in how the project is undertaken. So demonstrating how you approach that collaboration, evidence that you work that way would go very well in your submission. So this point we take very seriously. This isn't a huge project, which is as far as timeframe and budget. So that's why we're only expecting that one final report as the key substantive deliverable out of this piece of work. The maximum budget that's available is $200,000. The timeframe is up to 12 months. It might be achievable in a shorter time period. That's fine if you don't have to take the 12 months. It could be possible this work could be completed in less than that, but we're looking at timeframes of up to 12 months from the time that that project plan is agreed to at the start. A bit here about governance and reporting. We welcome consortium submissions to projects, but we do like to have one lead provider as far as contracting goes with the centre, and then you can subcontract out to others if you'd like a consortium approach. So the contract is with us. We have that project management committee, as I said, that collaboratively governs the project, and that's the primary governance group. This project will also have a reference group that has already been formed from other fire and rescue and other emergency services to inform and advise into this project and support the project team in developing the project. So there'll be regular governance meetings, particularly with that project management committee, which so that will have FRV, it's Fire and Rescue New South Wales will be on that as well. Paul, is that right?
Yes, that's right, Blythe, and we're still exploring representation from another agency as well.
Yeah, thank you. So, and there is quarterly project reporting, etc., that will support you with the centre with an online system for doing that. So we will set you up for that throughout the project. So all information about this EOI and documents that you need are available on the project page. Please keep an eye on that. Keep any questions you have about this project and the EOI process and your submission, please send them by email to research@naturalhazards.com.au. Don't send them to myself or Paul directly. We provide answers back in writing, and we put those questions and answers on that project page, so they're available to all applicants. So if you have a look at that page, any frequently asked questions that have been raised and answered through the process will be added up there. This submission, the EOIs are due to the centre at that email address by 5 p.m. at Australian Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, 4th of December. So it's not that far away. So this is the page where everything you need will be on. There's a bit more project information under there, but all the documents and those FAQs will be available here. So I'm not going to go through all the details of this, but this is listed in the EOI. It's what we expect to see in those expressions of interest that come back. But I did want to make a couple of points. Please do use our submission form. That means putting content in the form itself, not attaching a proposal and then putting in our form, please see page 10 of attached proposal. We don't take EOI submissions that way. So we're looking for the content to be in our submission form, and please keep an eye on the word limits. If submissions are over word limit, they're actually deemed ineligible to be assessed. So follow those word limits that are written in the call for EOI document very tightly. There's also a list of things that you can attach to that submission form. Please do not attach anything other than what's been listed as an attachment. And if you need any clarity around that, please do send us an email and we'll clarify that for you. We also have a budget template now that we would like you to use to put budget information in and attach to that submission form. And we also ask for you to review our proposed contract form and flag any high-level changes that you would want to that form. That doesn't impact the assessment of your EOI. If you have changes listed on there, we're not going to think that you're too difficult to work with. It helps us get going more quickly with the contracting process to avoid delays. That's why we're asking for them at that time. There are a few things that we can't change in contracts because of our contract with the Commonwealth Government. So that also gives us an opportunity to flag those things with you very early on and more quickly. So that's what that is for. is there any, I'll just pause for a second. Is there any questions about content or submitting process around expressions of interest at all? Great. As I said, welcome to shoot them through to us via email. And that's just more information about the other things that are listed in that EOI, but that's all in the document. Do please look at the assessment criteria. We do use these very closely when we assess EOI. So we're wanting your EOI to give us the information we need to assess you well, your submission well against these items. A note with research capability, we sometimes get statements that are about an organisation's research capability. That is fine, but we are also looking at the team who will be doing the project, their capability to do work in this area. So not only an organisational level capability statement, we're looking at a statement that's specific to the team for this project. And then just finally, to reiterate key dates. So we are here at the orange circle with the online briefing. That due date on the 4th of December is an immovable date. And the 5 p.m. is a fixed cutoff. We don't give extensions. So please do get your submissions in ahead of time or by that date. It would break my heart if it was submitted an hour later and we had a great submission and we couldn't assess it. But we are very, very firm with that. So just giving you forewarning of that. The outcome of the EOI assessment, you will hear from us around mid-January as we get that together, just taking into account some leave and things over Christmas. That, I think, is it. Thank you very much for your time. We do have up to 10 minutes now. If you have any other follow-on questions or things that you'd like clarified, you're welcome to raise them now. But that is the content that Paul and I wanted to make sure that you had in hand in order to prepare your submissions for this project. So if you have any other questions, feel free to pop your hand or just put your mic on. Deb.
It's a question about access to agency data and current reporting. And I guess the interest or enthusiasm that different agencies might have to participate. Just listening to Paul say that at the moment we've got New South Wales and Vic. Are others engaged in maybe making their current performance reporting available?
I'm not in a position at the moment to say that agency data is going to be specifically available for this. That is data that isn't already publicly reported.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when thinking about what this project is doing, it's possibly less about crunching individual numbers than asking questions about the conceptual purpose behind it. And I suppose it's a bit difficult to answer without knowing exactly where a project team wants to take things.
Yeah.
Certainly there is a fair amount of data and information in the public domain, and I'm just aware of that from researches I've done, and in doing those, I haven't had to go to any agencies and say, please open your data vaults. You may be aware that Fire Rescue Victoria has actually had some issues with data following our cyber attack,
Yes.
which we're still recovering from. But I would have thought, and again, subject to how a project proposal and project plan is constructed, I would have thought it would be possible to do a fair amount of this work without saying, look, we need to delve into agencies' unpublished data in order to be able to come up with the things that you need. So
yeah, agree.
I guess I'm conscious that isn't a wholly satisfactory answer. I think that if there was a project plan that clearly set out a need to do that, it would then be possible to reach out to agencies on an individual basis, or possibly through AFAC or through NHRA, saying, hey, we've got this need, who could support it? But I think, as I say, it would be a little bit of a wait and see what the plan is, and then if that is a requirement, obviously very happy so far as we can to support. I'm just not in a position to make commitments at the moment.
Totally fine. Thank you.
Any other questions people would like to raise at this time while we have Paul and myself here? Great. If others come up, email them to us at a later time. But thank you very much, Paul, for your time and contribution to the briefing today. I know that applicants get a lot of value out of these. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Good luck with your submissions. We appreciate the time and effort that goes into them. And please, as I said, note that frequently asked questions and answers will go up on that webpage. So have a look at that through the process before you submit your submission, just to check if there's anything there relevant for you. But thank you all very much for your time today.